Today, we're diving into a legal case where the weapons weren't fists, but words. A marriage judged on the cruelty of taunts, right in the middle of a global crisis. So let's just get right to it. Can taunting your spouse actually be legal grounds for a divorce? I mean, we all know relationships can get heated, but where does the law draw the line between a nasty argument and actual provable cruelty? Can words alone, especially when someone's at their lowest point, be enough to end a marriage? Well, in a recent case out of India, the Chhattisgarh High Court gave a pretty definitive answer. Yes, it absolutely can. In this explainer, we're going to walk through how this court legally defined verbal taunts during the pandemic as cruelty, and it sets a really fascinating precedent. So first up, we're going to look at how this case kind of re-examines the whole concept of cruelty, especially in the context of our modern, high-stress world. You know, this whole thing didn't just happen in a vacuum. The entire case is set against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic. And you have to remember that context, the financial instability, the emotional stress, because it's absolutely critical to understanding the court's final decision. Okay, let's zoom in on the actual people involved here and the specific allegations that brought this private struggle into a very public courtroom. So here are the players. On one side, you have the husband. He's an advocate, but he was unemployed during the pandemic. On the other side, his wife. She's a school principal, has a PhD, and was financially stable. Right away, you can see this massive power imbalance that cropped up during the crisis. And here's a key detail. She never once appeared in court to challenge his side of the story. The husband laid out some really serious claims. He said that after his wife got her PhD and her job as a principal, her whole attitude changed. He talked about constant taunts about him being jobless, endless fights over small things, and financial demands he just couldn't meet. The breaking point, he claimed, was when she deserted him and their son, taking only their daughter with her. Now, you hear these allegations, you know the wife didn't even show up to defend herself. You'd think this would be a pretty open and shut case, right? Well, that is not what happened at first. And here's where the legal journey gets a little bumpy. So the wife leaves in September 2020. The husband waits the legally required 2 years, then files for divorce in 2022. But then, in October of 2023, the family court actually dismisses his case. So what on earth went wrong? This is the crucial point. The family court based its entire decision on a counseling report, one that suggested the husband was actually the one who didn't want the marriage to work. But here's the kicker. That report was never officially submitted as evidence. It wasn't part of the official record. That procedural error became the whole reason the husband could appeal to a higher court. And that brings us to the High Court. Let's take a look at how this higher court analyzed the exact same set of facts and came to a completely different conclusion. First things first, the High Court laid out its definition of mental cruelty. They made it clear, this isn't about one single argument. It's about a pattern of behavior that causes so much mental agony and distress that it becomes literally impossible for two people to keep living together. And the language the court used here is just so direct and powerful. They didn't just talk about fighting in general. They zeroed in on the insults and humiliation during a time of financial vulnerability. In other words, the pandemic context was everything. It's what turned the taunts into something the law saw as exceptionally cruel. Next up, the court had to deal with the issue of desertion. Legally, it's not enough for someone to just leave. You have to prove something called animus diserandi. It's a fancy term for the intention to desert. And the court found that by leaving with their daughter, abandoning their son, and never participating in the legal proceedings, the wife showed a clear, willful decision to end the marriage for good. On top of the cruelty and the intent to leave, the case also came down to one simple number, 2, as in 2 years. That's the legal waiting period of desertion that's required before you can file for divorce. Since she left in 2020 and he filed in 2022, that critical legal box was checked. So let's just quickly recap the High Court's logic. 1, the husband's allegations were credible, and since they were never challenged, they stood. 2, the wife's total absence from the proceedings actually made his case stronger. 3, the lower court made a huge mistake by using a document that wasn't even official evidence. So, adding all that up, they concluded that both mental cruelty and desertion were legally established. So, the divorce was granted. But the impact of this case is way bigger than just one couple. So, what's the big takeaway here? Why does this ruling really matter?
Well, it matters because it's a powerful statement that cruelty isn't just physical violence. The court is acknowledging that emotional attacks, especially taunting someone about their finances during a global crisis, can be just as destructive to a marriage, and it can be legally recognized as such.
And finally, the court made this very practical declaration. They said the marriage had an irretrievable breakdown. They weren't just ending a legal contract. They were recognizing the human reality that some relationships are just broken beyond repair, and the law needs to reflect that. This case, which really was born out of a very modern crisis, leaves us with a big question to think about. As our society changes, as we face new pressures and vulnerabilities, how will our laws continue to adapt, to redefine cruelty, commitment, and the very boundaries of a relationship?